Hello, and welcome to today's webinar. My name is Peter McNall, and I'm the Director of Technical Marketing here at WatchGuard Technologies. And today we've got a very full agenda. I'm going to have presentation's going to go probably just about an hour, depending on the number of questions. And already have questions queuing up. So what I'd like to be able to do is answer the questions at the end of the presentation, although this one is a little bit different than some of my other presentations if you've sat in on those. And really there's two halves to this. The first half is just kind of a preview of some of the features that will be available in 11.9. And then the second half of the presentation will talk exclusively about APT blocker, which is also part of the 11.9 release. So with that, let's go ahead and get started. So the first thing I want to talk about or remind folks is about the Firebox T10. Now, while officially it is not part of the 11.9 release, it's been out since 11.83, but I do want to make sure that people remember that we've just recently released this appliance, the Firebox T10, and its primary use case is for the home office or very small offices where you may have 4 or 5 individuals working from a location. I think the big difference on this appliance that you might see with other devices aimed at that users or that particular space is that this one is really, you're talking about enterprise security all the way down to that home office. It runs all of the same features and functions as the rest of our product line. And provides you excellent security, but on top of that, management, right? If you are a managed service provider, you can incorporate that right into the WatchGuard System Manager. Now, there is something also I would add, although I don't have a slide, but I just thought of it, and I want to make sure that you're aware of this. Part of the T10 rollout was a change in Fireware Pro. And as all of you know, being experts at selling WatchGuard products, that we had a standard version and a pro version of our software. Today, that's really not the case. Every product will receive the pro version of our software, except the T10. So where it was sometimes kind of a challenge selling maybe a 25 or a 26 and trying to figure out what features you needed and whether you needed to get the Pro upgrade or not, you don't have to go through that process anymore because the 25, 26, 33 will all come with Pro already enabled. So that'll mean that all of our products will have Pro and all the features associated with that. The Firebox T10 will not be sold with Pro and thus not have things like multi-WAN and a few other features that are associated with the Pro version of software. So if you currently have a 25, 26, 33, you can get a license upgrade and just go to the website, download your new license, and it'll have the Pro version of the software. So adding more value to those products that you've already sold, and providing more features and functions. The other key element of the Firebox T10 is that it's actually a very capable appliance in terms of firewall throughput capabilities. UTM throughput is 55 megabits, so you're going to be able to run those services in those smaller environments. And it's recommended if you're running those services that you limit the number of users to about 5 users. Now let's talk about some of the other features that are actually part of the Fireware 11.9 release. And there's a ton of features, so I can't possibly cover them all. But I will touch on what I think are some of the highlights, this being one of them. So we're expanding our capabilities in the area of SIM integration. In fact, we have worked or collaborated with IBM and their QRadar product and collaboratively come up with modifications to our syslog and they have built-in hooks so that they can take that syslog feed and present it into their solution. So if you're running QRadar, you have the ability to send the logs directly to that solution, in addition to sending it to the WatchGuard dimension. So a couple of options there around logging. Now, one of the things I'm really super excited about is the change in traffic management. Now, traffic management has always been a challenge. I have been a sales engineer previous to this position for about 10 years. And, I still at times struggled with traffic management and trying to get my head wrapped around which interfaces upload, which interfaces download, how do I manage traffic, and what sort of rules do I have to do to be able to apply that to applications. Well, the great thing is that traffic management now, we've taken, decoupled that interface requirements. So now it's much more flexible in terms of how you utilize it. And probably the biggest takeaway, I think, for a lot of folks is the ability to apply traffic management actions to specific applications. So in my example here, I went into a traffic management. I created a traffic management action, titled it YouTube, provided a maximum and minimum guaranteed bandwidth, or maximum bandwidth. And I'm applying it to all policies, and I'll describe what that means here in a moment. But it means that in any policy that YouTube is passing out through the firewall, I want you to apply this. And I've done that by opening application control, searching specifically for YouTube under the category of streaming media. I'm allowing it, and then you'll see a checkbox for traffic management action. And the action that I created is now listed in the drop-down menu. So in the Firebox System Manager, and this is also available in the UI, but I chose to use for this demonstration the Firebox System Manager, you'll see that my ability to manage those YouTube streams to make sure that they fall within the parameters that I've allotted to it. And you can see that YouTube was taking exactly as much as bandwidth as I was allowing it. So you're going to get a lot more flexibility, and particularly around applying it to applications. So the next option is how you want to change the traffic management type. Now, in the previous example, I applied that to any instance of YouTube across all policies. Now, what you can do as an option is change the type, and now it's per IP address. So now I have the same traffic restrictions for YouTube, but it's applied to individual IP addresses through the firewall or that matching policy. So that now that I don't have one individual utilizing all of the bandwidth and not allowing someone else. So now I can manage it across all of my users as well. So now we have users and applications being tied together to make sure that we have the proper requirements. Additionally, I can apply this action to categories. So that was, I think this is actually a nice feature, specifically around streaming media. If you didn't want to have to go in and configure every single streaming media with a specific traffic action, you can do that at the category level. So you'll see here I have enabled streaming media, and I have my my action, so that's my traffic management action that I created specifically for the streaming media category. So any new applications that fall within streaming media would be applied this traffic action. So again, a great way to manage some really bandwidth hungry type of applications across your environment. So traffic management, I gave you an example of what all policy means. It means that any time you see an application, for example, the action will be applied across all policies. You can apply it on a per policy basis so that maybe only a certain policy needs to have traffic management applied to it, and then a per IP address. So I showed you that as well. So in this case, my example, I created another traffic management action specifically for my home office phone, which I use Vonage. I provided on a per policy basis maximum minimum bandwidth. And you'll see as we move to the right that I have my Vonage phone policy. And in the traffic management action area on the advanced tab, you'll see that there is the how you apply it. Now in the past, you applied it to the interface. In this case, you're applying it to source and destination. So that should make it easier to understand and to apply and make sure that you're using it correctly. So if we look at the results of this, you'll see that, again, I have a policy specific for VoIP. The policy is Vonage-phone, and I have exactly the tolerance that I was expecting for my Vonage connection is right within the maximum and the minimum. So again, I think that this is a huge benefit for everyone in terms of the flexibility and just how you're going to use it. Now, my last example here is I wanted to show you on a per IP address, and what you'll see is a list of they call it clients in this case. They aren't associated with authenticated users. It's just that I've selected the traffic management action as per IP. So think of it as a client is an individual IP address, and now I can see exactly the utilization across all of the users that are matching. In this case, it would be for YouTube. So I've got some that are barely using it, and I've got others that are maximizing that. So again, traffic management, very excited about the new functionality associated with traffic management. A few other items I want to bring up, user-based administration. So now many of you who are WatchGuard savvy and have been with WatchGuard for quite a while, you know how to use the WatchGuard System Manager. You also are aware that within that you have role-based administration. But that means that you have to set up the WSM server in order to get that functionality. Now with 11.9, you get a limited amount of that functionality directly on the firewall itself. So the advantages are that it's on box. You don't have to have the WSM server. You can utilize an external database, and it allows for auditing of your administrators. So in my example here, I'm utilizing a user within Active Directory, and that's Peter MC application. The authentication server is my Active Directory server, and my role, now there's only two roles. That is basically the administrator and the monitor. Very similar to your status and configuration passwords. But the nice thing here is that, one, I've got an audit trail, but also in this particular case, if Peter MC leaves the organization, obviously password management becomes so much easier because now I can just eliminate them out of Active Directory, and I don't have to go in and think about changing the passwords on my firewalls. And then the last user you'll see is WatchGuard support. So it'll make adding or allowing WatchGuard to connect to your firewall much easier, and won't have to give them the passwords, the status, and the administrative passwords. So those can still be kept secret. Now I do want to mention again is the new access point. I did a training earlier on this, but just as a reminder, support and availability for the AP102 will be around the release date of Fireware 11.9. And a couple highlights I want to make for the 102. It is an indoor-outdoor AP, whereas the 100 and 200 are strictly meant for indoor applications. The 102 is very similar to the 100 in terms of capabilities. Both have single radios. All of them have 2.5 or 5 gigahertz options. The maximum data rate throughput is very similar to the 100 at 300 megabits. The 200 double that because it has 2 radios. Suggested clients are 30 and 60. And then we get into some of the very specific differences, and that is environmental. So obviously this is designed to be outdoors and handle weather conditions and extreme temperature and dust environments. A couple other things to note is that the 102 does not ship with a power adapter, so you would need to order that at the time of purchase. So that can be an AC adapter or a PoE injector. The nice thing about the PoE injector is that, of course, you can order that from WatchGuard, but we use industry standards, so if you already have PoE injectors, you can utilize those for the AP102. The mounting options for the 102 are different than the 100 and 200. This is a directional antenna, so it is meant to be deployed either in a pole or wall mount. And so it provides you the ability to aim this to be able to get the best coverage possible, as opposed to the 100 and 200, which is more of an omnidirectional and designed to be mounted typically on a ceiling with a circular pattern. Now, what else comes with 11.9 in terms of wireless? Well, there's actually some really, really cool functionality that's been added, particularly around the management of APs, and certainly around, when I say management, a big part of that's visibility. A big part of that is deployment processes. I think one of the challenges with the 100 and the 200 when we launched those is that we were very thin on any sort of deployment tools to figure out, what sort of channel conflicts might I have, what is the power capability, what sort of power am I emitting, those types of things. So in 11.9, you're going to see under the Gateway Wireless Controller this several new sections or additional functionality in various sections. So mapping is the first one I think that'll pop out to you. And immediately when you select this, you're going to get a great map that shows you all the APs in relation to your APs. You can show just the WatchGuard APs or all the APs that are within range of your access points, and presented in a map that immediately can show you things like channel conflicts. So in the right, you see that I have a channel conflict, and I know this because the line is red, which allows me to drill down further into that particular AP, and now I can see what my conflict is. It's channel 11. In fact, I have other APs in my immediate area also using channel 11, which perhaps I want to statically assign my AP to something other than a channel 11. So I have some flexibility, but more importantly, feedback in terms of the things that I'm seeing, so I can actually make some decisions there on how I want them deployed. Some other visibility tools. You have, again, I'm working from I think in this case, utilizing the web UI, but I can run a site survey. I have my log messages, network statistics, but I also have the ability to modify the LED displays on the APs themselves. I can make them blink, flash, so I can identify them. I can even turn them off. I can restart them, reboot them, and upgrade them as well. So I've got more usability, more functionality in the area of wireless. From a wireless visibility, the summary tab gives me a lot of great data, and it's displayed very similarly to how the front dashboard is displayed, the front panel on within the web UI. So each click is a query that shows me and allows me to drill down to see top users, amount of data per access point, per SSID, and those types of things. So I can see exactly what my utilization is. Additionally, on 11.9, we're adding more functionality around IPv6. So we will have IPv6 support for link aggregation, VLANs, and dynamic routing. As to additional functionality around IPv6, we do have a roadmap available on our website so you can get a pretty good idea where we are headed in terms of IPv6 functionality. Wireless networks. Now, the wireless network specifically I'm referring to would be the access point firewalls. Those would be the 25, 26, and 33. In those devices, when you created or enabled the wireless functionality on those boxes, you had to bridge those networks to an existing interface and then modify the policies accordingly. With 11.9, that once that you enable that wireless capabilities, it actually becomes a separate interface. As such, then it is functional just the way any other interface is on the WatchGuard firewall. So now you have even more control over how you want to build policies around the wireless networks that are associated with the those devices specifically. So it gives you much more granular and tighter control over those traffic flows coming from your wireless networks. And the last preview feature I wanted to talk to you about is Web UI support for FireCluster. You now will be able to manage the firewall policies, network configurations from the Web UI for a cluster that is 2 boxes in either active, passive, or active mode. There is one thing to be aware of in terms of any cluster management that you want to do, setting them up, rebooting them. You know, if you have to remove the cluster and then re-add the cluster, that still requires the WSM to be able to do that. So the Web UI use allows for, I would say, day-to-day usage. The WSM will be required for any modifications to the cluster itself. But I think this is something that I know many of you have asked for and have been waiting for this to be available. And under 11.9, it will be. So again, 11.9 offers a whole bunch of great features and functions for you to take a look at. It will be available the end of April. And you will just go to the WatchGuard website, search in your software download section, and then go ahead and do the updates. So now what I wanted to do was to take any specific questions around what I've just previewed for you before we get into specifically APT blocker. So if you have those, go ahead and just put those into the question area, and I'll answer those here in a moment. All right, so I'll go ahead and while you're formulating those questions, I'll go ahead and continue on with the presentation and talk about APT blocker. So I think on this presentation, what I wanted to do was first off give a little bit of background about APTs and what APT blocker is designed to do, what is it we're offering and why we're offering in terms of the threats that we see that are out there and how we can mitigate some of those threats with this new service called APT blocker. So with that, let's go ahead and get started with our presentation on APT blocker. So what is an advanced persistent threat? Well, I think that there's probably several definitions, but I think there's some core attributes to APTs, and obviously the name itself allows us to get a pretty good handle of what's going on, an advanced persistent threat. And when we talk about advanced, we are referencing the software payloads that are utilized to compromise network environments, and the advanced portion comes to either using zero-day type malware or malware designed very specifically for maybe environments that are specific to one location that you're trying to attack. They are advanced in that they are able to bypass other security systems. So that's generally what the advanced piece or attribute is. Persistent really goes to a different attack style or method, in the idea that rather than doing a giant distributed denial of service attack or some sort of spam campaign by compromising a bunch of machines, the idea is that you're going to launch the attack using some sort of advanced malcode with the intent to be stealthy and silent inside that organization, so that you can then collect as much information as possible, learn about the environment before launching the specific attack. Targeted has attribute has a couple different meanings. I talked a little bit just a moment ago, mentioned it. Understanding the environment that you're trying to attack and crafting the malware specifically for that environment. Targeted could also mean that you have a specific agenda, and utilizing the advanced malware, you want to execute that on this particular target. Maybe you certainly see this in the case of nation states, but certainly in cyber criminals, they are more and more often identifying rich targets by maybe the number of credit card transactions, maybe the intellectual property, and targeting private businesses that way. Targeted also can mean that the attack is specific maybe to a user, that I've identified a very high-profile individual that oftentimes works at home, knowing that their security at their house is from their ISP, and you can circumvent that rather easily by subjecting them to some sort of phishing attack that they'll click on and then become a launching point for a further attack. So that really represents those attributes that are common amongst all advanced persistent threats. Now, the one thing about advanced persistent threats is they're not necessarily brand new attacks. In fact, as far back as 2009, with GhostNet, and then as we move further in time, we have Stuxnet and RSA compromise and GOS and Flame. All of those representing very advanced attacks using all three of those attributes to compromise the intended targets. And the interesting thing about this is that those were perpetrated mostly by nation states with some sort of political agenda. Now, what you're seeing recently is cyber criminals adopting those same techniques for attacks that are usually have a financial aspect to them. Certainly, some of the most recent ones, the Adobe breach and the Target breach, are perfect examples of how advanced malware was utilized for a financial gain, not necessarily a nation-state attack or political means. So really, you see this transition of the emergence of these very technical type of attacks and the using them for criminals. So let's take a look at one example of this, and this would be Stuxnet. Stuxnet really represented a new classification of attack, meaning that utilizing multiple threat vectors to perpetrate the attack. You have zero-day exploits, self-replication, the ability to jump air gaps, CNC activity. You have the ability for this software or this malcode to identify the environments with specific payloads designed for the environments that they're being executed in. So really, really complex. And really, the fingerprints of this are definitely nation-state activity. Unfortunately, this also ushered in that whole new not necessarily classification of attack, but different use of those attacks. And obviously, and of course, You create something like that, you're not going to be able to keep it contained, and Stuxnet type of attacks or variants have clearly made their way into other types of attacks. You see these techniques in ZooSpot attacks, where individuals, even small organizations, have been compromised with this banking Trojan. I can give you a great example. Here locally in the Seattle area, there was a regional hospital that was compromised with a variant of the ZooSpot. It was delivered by a phishing attack. The individual was a payroll, worked in the payroll department. They clicked on that link, and that obviously a cascade of events occurred. The end result was the attacker was able to, over a period of time, steal $1 million out of their accounts. Some of the other examples in the last or the end of last year was CryptoLocker. I think that had a huge impact on organizations of all sizes and even private individuals and the ransom activities associated with that. But really the key with this is that you're looking at those advanced threats created by nation states now being leveraged by cyber criminals. So the question is, how are my users being compromised? And obviously spear phishing is a typical way that you might want to compromise that environment. It's very, very effective, particularly if you know something about that end user. In most cases, that is a chain of events, right? You don't typically see a single event. Usually it is a combination of things, a multi-vector type of attack that compromises these environments. And in this case, you can imagine an email that is designed specifically for a high-valued individual in an organization. By doing a little bit of research, maybe on Facebook or Google, maybe you find out their personal interests, you send them an email, hey, join my motorcycle club, click on this link, and you can sign up and get this great information about some rides we're having this weekend. The user clicks on it, and then obviously they become compromised. In which case, you then would redirect them to another site to download that payload possibly. Or you might go after a very high-profile website at various times, or when you might expect high traffic, or when that user might be visiting that traffic and compromising them. The other piece to this I think we need to pay attention to is this chains of trust. Now, there's two great examples. The first one here is the RSA breach, which started as an email that had some content in there. The user clicked on it. The attacker then remained stealthy and able to locate and find the intellectual property, the source code for the tokens, extracted that information, launched additional attacks against high-profile individuals at Lockheed, knowing the information from the tokens, utilizing a keylogger. You've got a lot of great information then to execute attack against Lockheed, or then further that attack against the Department of Defense. Now, even more recently, Target was an example of this. You had the attackers leveraging weaker security at a business partner or a contractor for Target, and then utilizing and leveraging their lower security to then infiltrate Target's environment. And then again, stealthy was the key piece of this, locating the point-of-sale systems, and then inserting a zero-day malware variant of a POS scraping memory scraper to be able to then execute that attack. So when you think about that ecosystem, that security ecosystem that you're going to build out, remember that you have to look at all vectors of attack and look at all of your business partners, not just presume that you are safe because you have the best security in the world. So let's talk about malware. And really, malware is a common feature of all of those previous attack examples, whether it's delivered directly in that phishing email or the phishing email redirects you to some website to download that, or whether that chain of trust is broken down because a business partner's been compromised by some zero-day malware. And the reason that these folks are getting infected is because malware is very difficult to capture and to be able to block, and that is because of its ability to change, where attackers are taking variants of existing attacks and doing so at a very high rate, or maybe it's a brand new variant, and by executing it at a specific user, then your likelihood of discovery is also low. And then also, in many cases, malware on its own can morph or change, thus making the job of AV writers extremely difficult in their attempts to create signatures to be able to block and identify this. And in fact, there was a great white paper I read recently entitled Endpoint Security Demands Defense in Depth and Advanced Analytics. And it was a great paper because it talked specifically about the role of AV and most specifically about endpoint AV controls and how effective they are. And part of that was a survey that this individual did with IT professionals. And really, at the end of the survey, what you come to is this great slide. I think really illustrates where we are when we're talking about malware today, and that is that 62% of these security professionals strongly agree that host-based security is not effective for detecting zero-day or polymorphic malware commonly used for targeted attacks today. So that is really, really significant, and I think what it means is that the IT professionals that we're talking to as resellers of WatchGuard security are very open to additional solutions. And really what we need to keep talking about is attacks are changing and you need to adapt to them. And that's exactly what we're going to be offering them with APT blocker. So what is the, why is there an issue? I mean, we certainly talked about attacks, the transition from nation-state attacks, those techniques being utilized by cyber criminals to attack private individuals, private organizations, taking advantage of the difficulty it is for AV vendors to keep up with this constantly changing and morphing environment. And what you end up with is this zero-day threat curve. And essentially what it says is that as an AV writer, or if I'm trying to patch an operating system or an application, I need to know about this attack, and then at that point I can start the process of fixing it. And for AV vendors, it means building a signature. For the OS and the applications, it means fixing the flaws in those specific environments. Now, in terms of security solutions, you're really seeing the emergence over fairly recently of the use of sandbox technology. And the idea here is that we want to have a solution that I can capture a zero-day malware and then be able to observe it in a controlled environment so that I can then build security defenses for that. And I know many of you are virtualization experts, but I just want to do a little review for some of you who may not really understand how this might apply to malware analysis. And the idea here is that you're going to have some sort of virtual environment. There's a whole bunch of different hypervisors that are available and in use. The most common ones that you probably heard of is Microsoft Hyper-V and VMware. Those are examples of hypervisors. And the idea with the hypervisor is that you can have multiple hosts residing on that same piece of hardware. So you would create a host, in this case it would be a Windows environment if you were a malware, doing malware analysis, and you would take that captured bit of malware and you would allow it to do what it naturally wants to do inside this environment. And oftentimes you're going to have tools in this environment to be able to monitor what's going on. You're going to have debugging tools and the like to be able to record exactly what's going on and insert themselves in the code execution and be able to analyze those. So in general, that's what sandboxing technology is. Now, I am going to talk a bit more about sandboxing technology because this illustration and what I just talked about really represents a really basic first-generation sandboxing technology. And with WatchGuard APT blocker, we are doing things that really our competitors are not doing in terms of how this environment is constructed and some of the things that we're able to see and they're not. But let's do a little bit of recap in terms of malware evolution and some of the security solutions that we've used in the past. So in the good old days, we had a plain virus. That was when virus detection was relatively easy. You could create signatures generally as fast or faster than the virus was propagating. Now, attackers, obviously, you have this cat and mouse game, and the idea is that as attackers realize that they are being discovered, they want to create ways to evade detection. And in the early days, you saw certainly a lot of hacking, that is the ability to modify the attack by using encryption techniques, and that allowed it to be slightly different or enough different that you would need a new signature to be able to identify that. Then you had polymorphic viruses that could modify or change on their own, and then obviously the advantage there is you want to be faster than the AV vendors. So then the game is really on for the AV vendors because they have to really ramp up their resources to stay ahead of this. Now, again, as I said, security needs us to evolve because the attackers are always constantly looking for vulnerabilities in how they can modify their attacks. And they did this by incorporating CNC, command and control. Now, the advantage of that is when I've compromised a host, I can now control it, meaning that that host is making callbacks to me, and I can then tell it to do different things. Maybe it's to send out spam, or maybe to turn on a keylogger. So from an attacker perspective, it's very useful. It allows me to do all sorts of different things inside this environment. The downside of this was that oftentimes it was very noisy, and IT administrators could identify this activity. So in order to evade that type of a detection process, then we go into fluxing, and fluxing allows me not to rely on a single command and control, but I'm going to have perhaps hundreds or thousands of command and control and be able to spin those up very, very quickly, and utilizing DNS techniques so that you end up playing whack-a-mole with the command and control because they now exist seemingly everywhere. So APT solutions arrived to be able to address these types of attacks, and that they're constantly changing, and those arrived in the form of that first generation sandboxing, and those techniques still exist today and are used to identify some pretty basic elements of attacks, and whether they are just the plain old virus, polymorphic virus, or viruses that utilize some sort of command and control with the intent of being very persistent inside organizations. Now, those attackers are crafty individuals, and what they try to do is now one-up us. And they do that by using evasive techniques, meaning they start to understand how sandboxing technology works. And this is where the WatchGuard solution comes in. It is able to detect evasion techniques or activities far better than our competition in terms of what they're offering. So how is it that WatchGuard is doing this? Well, we are in continuing on with our best-of-breed approach. And for those of you who are longtime WatchGuard advocates, you know that we partner with some really great companies to provide great solutions on our appliance. The one that comes to mind always is WebSense, URL filtering, and now they have a whole bunch of categories specific to security. And APT blocker follows the same path. We are partnering with LastLine. And the great thing about LastLine is that it is a well-known solution in the malware analysis field. In fact, they've been around since 2011. They're based in Redwood City, California. And the founders are computer scientists. They are professors at the University of California and Santa Barbara at Northeastern University. Their expertise has grown out of 10 years of research and the development of the Anubis malware analysis toolkit, and that is actually available today. So for those of you who are looking for a little extra credit, if you go and do a search on Anubis, you certainly would recognize this as being a tool that's utilized by researchers worldwide. In fact, it's still used today by many of our competitors. The difference is that these folks at LastLine took all of everything they learned over those 10 years, 8 years when Anubis came online, and developed the LastLine solution. So you're taking all of that fantastic technology and you're integrating it into a product that we now have available, or shortly have available, called APT blocker on the WatchGuard firewalls. Now again, I know many of you are super overachievers, and you're probably right now Googling LastLine, which is fantastic. I really encourage you to do that. There are some great white papers. Their blogs are fantastic. But also, if you go to YouTube, they have a YouTube channel, and you have the opportunity to listen to the founders as they're doing lectures about malware analysis. So for the rest of your day, you can kind of goof off at work a little bit and do your own research. So what is APT blocker? Now, I think probably the best way that you can describe it is high-resolution malware analysis. Now, for me, I'm a very visual person, and if I can associate this with something common to me, it's really useful. And I find that thinking about televisions is a great way of doing this. I'm old enough that I had a black and white TV with about 2 channels, and you put some aluminum foil on the antenna, and you kind of get this fuzzy outline of some sort of activity going on the television. So certainly over the past 45 years or so, we've evolved quite a bit in television technologies, and quite a bit just recently with digital TV sets. But even then, what you're seeing is, just in the case as in the case of sandboxing technology, you have what was originally 480 resolution, 720 resolution, 1080, and now even super resolution of over 4K, and that's really kind of the realm where we're talking about APT blocker. You're seeing things that the other solutions are not able to see. And how do we do this? Well, we do this because we are looking at malware at a very deep, low level, and that utilizes code-level execution and be able to understand what's going on, all the way down to individual CPU instructions, memory access, system calls, and most importantly, be able to detect evasion. And now I want to spend a moment and talk about evasion techniques, because this is really, really critical component to this. Evasion is a tool utilized by malware writers to identify the environments that they reside in. So now think about those sandboxes and the hypervisors that they are being utilized in. Those hypervisors have specific characteristics. Right? If you capture a piece of malcode, you execute it in there, it is going to behave differently than if it was actually executed on a device within a network. And malware writers are able to do this. They do this by doing environmental checks. Is do I detect any sort of mouse movements? Do I detect, when I look at the hard drive that is enabled, what sort of characteristics are that? Are they typical of a VM environment, a hypervisor environment, or any other hypervisor that may be present? Do I have access to a network? Is the IP scheme correct for the attack that I'm specifically creating? Is the domain correct for this attack? Things like that would indicate that that as a malware writer and as a piece of malcode would indicate that I have been successful or I am being executed in inside some virtual environment. And high-resolution malware analysis is able to identify these activities and then make the malcode believe that it doesn't exist in those environments, and providing it access all the way down to machine level so that you can then look at what's going on. And this is really critical because, as I keep talking about, security has to evolve because attackers are evolving. And you can see here by this screenshot that the toolkits that are widely available, in this case PX Cryptor 1.1, includes anti-virtualization tools. So it can identify if there are tools present or virtualization present to stop this bit of malcode. If it is present, you probably are going to put the software to sleep. You're going to put it into some looping mechanism. You're going to stall it so that it will outlast that malcode analysis. Because think about it, when you start analyzing malcode, you're going to be analyzing a lot of different files, and you only have a set period of time. So if you put it to sleep, then you can oftentimes bypass the systems that aren't able to see this. So with APT blocker, you actually are able to identify all of the code and how all of the code executes, as I said, down to machine level, network level, and then look for the things that are missed, because if you those are the areas that indicate that you have malware present, and then to be able to make a determination whether you want to allow or not allow that software. So let's go ahead and continue, and we're going to talk about specifically the solution set on the box and some of the features specific to APT blocker. So APT blocker, first up, is part of 11.9. So you will download that, run that on your firewalls. That'll be available, as I said, at the end of April. It also requires AV to be present. So for most of you who are using the security bundle, you've already got that prerequisite already installed. If you have just live security running on this box, you also have to get the AV license so that the two can run together. So that would be the AV and APT running. So once you've established that, then the analysis piece starts happening. And the environments that we're really focused on are Windows XP, Windows 7, XP obviously critical because support for XP has expired or is just about to. So we are looking at all Windows executable files, Word documents, Excel, PowerPoint, PDF. And then for Android, the most widely used mobile operating system out there and potentially the most vulnerable, we can analyze APK files that might be downloaded through the firewall. So if you have a mobile devices and someone's downloading something or updating something within your environment, you can identify and scan that as well. So covering both of these environments with this solution set. So let's talk about the specifics of how APT blocker works. Now, I got a question earlier about this specific slide, so I will, hopefully this will address the questions related to that. So the basic question was, can you walk through the process for the scanning of files? And so this APT blocker is part of the proxy technology, so you'll be running both the web file transfer and email proxies. The data will come into the firewall and be analyzed by the tools that are available. So those are the services running on the box. It will pass through the AV scanning. So AV will have first pass at this. So if it identifies it as a virus, it'll block it at the AV level. If it passes that, then it actually enters into APT blocker. So the file arrives at the APT blocker service. And so the first thing we do is we basically create a DNA or a fingerprint of this file. And we're going to look at our local cache. So if we can identify this locally, then our results are immediate. We will either allow or block this particular file. If we have no results from our local cache, we will then look to our remote cache. Our remote cache actually resides within the last line cloud. So they have multiple analysts, servers doing analysis, with more coming online in the next quarter or so to handle traffic from Europe and Asia Pac. So we will have, for those of you who are restricted in terms of your location and sending files across the globe, we will have more localized servers coming online very, very soon. So if it is not, if we don't have a result from that remote lookup, just determining whether that DNA is present, we will then take that file and we will do a file upload. That is done over an encrypted channel over HTTPS. The file now is sent to last line. Now, the only files that will be sent to last line will be those that you enable within the proxies for AV scan. So if you choose to block, say, executables within the proxies themselves, then it wouldn't pass into APT blocker because it has actually been blocked by the proxies before it even arrived. So in this case, the file has been allowed to pass all the way through my APT blocker. I don't have local results or a remote result, so I pass the file up the last line and the analysis process happens, and that high resolution analysis that we described earlier is now in process. And we've developed a DNA of that. So the time it takes for that to happen can be anywhere from 5 minutes to 15 minutes to have that DNA results. Now, in this particular case, the DNA results actually get passed back to the firewall that sent up the file. So now it's not only stored in the cloud, but it's also stored locally. So any files that get uploaded are, if they are documents like Word, PowerPoint, Excel, are destroyed after that analysis. Executable files, binary files, those types of things will remain for further analysis in last line so that we can improve our defenses even further on that. But the key point I wanted to make here is the time to of analysis and the time that we return the results so that the firewall now is able to identify these emerging threats. In other solution sets, this result process, this feedback mechanism, can take at least an hour and oftentimes distributed as part of an AV signature pack. So if you're utilizing another solution that does things this way, potentially you could be several hours before you actually are delivered the update to your device to be able to block any future files of that type. So the other great thing about this is having those results stored up the last line cloud is that all the WatchGuard firewalls now can participate. So the benefit of this is that you're distributing the risk, right? The idea when you create a risk pool is that you want as many individuals in that pool so that the odds of any one individual falling victim decrease. So your odds will decrease as more and more individuals are added to the pool. And that's really the advantage of what's going to be happening as we provide you APT blocker. Now all the WatchGuard firewalls will be able to participate in this and offer a common defense solution. So that is very much like how reputation-enabled defense works. So let me continue. I've already passed the hour, so I'm going to continue so that we have time for questions here. Now, there's another key element to this, and this is the setup process. Oftentimes, when we talk about really complex security, we talk about complex configuration, and when you add complexity, you add the potential for error. And when you do that, then either you're not going to use the solution or you're going to use it incorrectly and actually introduce additional chances for a compromise. So setup is very simple. You have an action settings based on the categories. You want to set the alarm and log. Those are not enabled by default, by the way. Please enable them because obviously visibility is critical. And then on the Policies tab, you'll go ahead and enable them for the policies that are present within the WatchGuard policy arena. So visibility, again, another key element. A great example of this is the Target breach. They spent a ton of money on security. They bought an APT solution and spent millions on that solution. And it didn't work for them, primarily because of the visibility, or it was confusing to the administrator. You had thousands of alerts triggering and basically overwhelmed the administrators to be able to identify that there was something going on. WatchGuard Dimension helps you in that it allows you to see exactly what's going on and be able to take the action you need to. In fact, it is so awesome, it just recently won New Product of the Year for 2014 from Network Computing. So for those of you who are on the line, have utilized or not have utilized WatchGuard Dimension, fantastic. For those of you who don't know about WatchGuard Dimension, you've got the rest of this evening and tomorrow. I want you to download WatchGuard Dimension from the WatchGuard site. No charge to you. Set it up. It's a virtual appliance for VMware and Hyper-V, and get using it. You're going to love it. It gives you a tremendous amount of visibility. And for when we integrate APT, you will see that there's a very tight integration, and you're going to see malware that is potentially either entering inside your network. So in addition to the top-level security dashboard, we also have reports that you can run and get, again, further views into what's going on inside your environment. And those reports are easily viewed so that you can understand what's going on. In fact, as you know, with WatchGuard Dimension, you could schedule these reports and have them emailed to you. So this would be a great something for you to review every single morning when you come in. Additionally, please, as I said, set up the alerting and alarming. Other things that are critical about this are the threat details. Now remember, I said that the great thing about APT Blocker is that it's high resolution analysis. And with the threat detail option here, you have the ability to see exactly what's going on. We understand the MIME type. We see why it was considered at high threat level. And you see network activities, command and control activities. I've had a lot of people ask about, hey, will it identify command and control channels? Yes, it does that within the execution part of that. Does it see DNS traffic? Yes, it sees DNS traffic, so we can identify that. Evasions, that's the critical part. That's the part that our competitors typically miss, are the evasion pieces, right? And so we can identify that and include that into the scoring so that we can then identify that and block it. So I want to, before we wrap up here, there's a few things that I want to finish up on before we start taking questions. The first thing, I want you to think about security as an ecosystem. And I know many of you know this. You live it. It's a mantra every day. You're vigilant for things inside your environment that increase your attack surface. And that is absolutely what you need to do. When you look at attacks today, they're multi-vectored. You need to think about all the possible ways that they could potentially enter your network. Is it email? Is it web traffic? Is it that partner that just showed up to do work on your server, or the accounting software? we need to pay attention to what those activities are and apply controls there. We also need to think about security as a system, and the great thing about the WatchGuard Unified Threat Management Appliance is that system is integrated into one tool, right, with one management interface. So you have default threat protections that can identify risk reconnaissance. It can identify first levels of denial of service. It can identify spoofing. It can identify malformed packets, things that are not quite right and shouldn't be processed any further. We can shed a lot of traffic in that fashion. Utilizing the proxy technology to be able to allow the proxies to handle the connection and look at things at a protocol level or a binary level or content to make sure that what we are allowing is actually, or what we're seeing is actually what we intend to allow. Then the services play a huge part in this. Application control. Think about the applications that people can be using. And the great thing about WatchGuard Dimension, it gives you visibility in those things. You know, don't forget that while it may seem rather benign, instant messaging often has a file transfer component enabled. So that potentially a vector into your organization. IPS is a great tool for identifying attacks. Maybe they're not zero-day attacks, but oftentimes attacks are going to be launched utilizing older attack methods because they're counting on us to be slow about patching systems. Or maybe they're attacking systems that never get patched. Think about your printers and all those other things that reside inside your network that are now network-enabled or internet-enabled that probably don't get patched very often. Home control systems are a great example. Netflix streaming media devices, they very rarely get patched and now are inside our organizations, whether it's our corporate headquarters or that home office that we're allowing our executives to work from. Web blocker, I mentioned web blocker has a whole separate category on security alone. In fact, it has a category on bots and botnets and command and control. Very useful tool. Reputation-enabled defense, making sure that we can identify distribution points for malcode. Spam blocker, phishing attacks associated with that. AV malware scanning on box, a critical component. You know, I've said maybe not some very nice things about the capabilities around AV, but you're never going to not have AV. That is with us forever on the endpoints, the servers, and within the gateway. We need that. We need as many signatures as possible to identify and work with new technologies. And those new technologies include APT blocker because we have to evolve our security as attackers evolve, and that's exactly what APT blocker provides to you. So some of the details in terms of launch, we announced APT blocker actually the first week of April at Interop. It was a great reception there. I spoke quite a bit and talked to a lot of people at Interop Las Vegas about it. It is part of the 11.9 release, which will be at the end of the year. NFR appliances where appropriate, maybe the 102, for example, or the software demos versions of the APT blocker also available. Keep in mind that there's a 30-day license that's included with all XTM firewalls for APT blocker. Also, don't forget, the XTM firewall also has to be running AV for us to be able to utilize some of the shared activity within there. Now, there is also white papers being written, infographic that's already available on our website. But also, we have a webinar coming up, and I'm sure it'll be recorded. But definitely register for this. Get your customers registered for this. I am very excited about this. APT, How to Survive the Attack. It's sponsored by Corey Knockreiner. He's our lead security strategist, and two other individuals. And I think it's going to be a great conversation, a different format than our typical webinar, so please, please attend that. Then I also want to point you to resources. I think oftentimes we overlook these, and if you have customers calling you and you're not able to just dispatch a technician right away, and you're like, what can I send them just so that they can start looking at things? We have a lot of video tutorials on our website with some great information. At least go ahead, you can direct your customers to that to get them started. Training is critical. Your techs, your network folks need training. Now remember that training is required as part of your partner, being a partner with WatchGuard, and it is something that you have to keep up to date. And you have a couple of options. You can do training in person, and you can see when and where those are available on the partner website. But also we have virtualized training as well, which is fantastic. It's actually, the training is done by WatchGuard trainers, and you're provided a lab that includes client machines and a WatchGuard firewall. So it's hands-on, but in this particular case, in your environment, so there's no travel required for that. The last thing before we take questions is we have the Partner Summit coming up, and I know this is maybe a stretch for many of you, but if you have the opportunity to come and visit us here in sunny Seattle, I know most of you don't believe it ever is sunny, but I looking out the window right now, and it's gorgeous. It's sunny. The mountains have snow on it. The water is beautiful. You have to come out here if you have the opportunity. I want to meet you in person. So please come to our 2014 Partner Summit and sign up for that if you or contact your local WatchGuard representatives, and they can tell you all the details specific to that. So please, I really hope that I'll have the opportunity to meet you. So I have a few questions. I'm going to go ahead and answer those. I understand that I am way over time, and I apologize for that. Please know that I have recorded this, so it will be available, as will the slides. So if you've missed something, then certainly we can go ahead and get that to you. So let me start with the questions, and I may not be able to get to all of them given the time restraints, but I will do my best. Okay, so a couple of the questions I covered already in terms of the type of files that are scanned. Those are Windows documents primarily, and executables for XP and Windows 7 environments is where they're executed in, and then that's where we're looking for those those attacks. Those environments are the only, well, that in the APK files for Android are the only environments currently today that we are looking at. I had another question about Linux, and obviously, some of you are going to ask about Macs. Those are certainly on the roadmap, and we'll be working with our partner to update this as we move forward. Let's see, where are those files sent? I also covered that as well. So this is a US-based company, although we are actively right now adding more and more servers globally. They do have some data centers already, I believe, in Europe, and then expanding that very shortly into Asia-Pac as well, so that for those of you who are restricted in terms of where you're sending files, that should meet your obligations there. Is the session downloaded and recorded? As we speak, both are happening, or at least the recording part. From environments, Windows XP and Windows 7 are the primary environments being examined. Question was, what about Windows 8 and servers and those things? And then obviously, what about Linux? You could expect more operating systems as we move forward and with the solution. What about privacies of files sent by APT online? What we consider our customers? Are there any online disclaimers about customer data privacy? At the time of release, I believe that those will be available to you. The one thing to remember is that any documents that are sent up in the form of PDFs and Word documents and things like that are destroyed. Executables, binaries, those things are kept for a longer period of time for further analysis. Also, if you're really constrained about this, remember that you could, within the how you process files is triggered on A/B scan. So if you have A/B scan enabled, those are the file types that will be processed into APT blocker. Excellent question. Is APT licensed separately? It is licensed separately, very much like DLP. DLP is a separate solution that you would purchase and apply. The APT blocker is a separate license, so it enables you to realize some more revenue around this for new customers, but also existing installations. I think all too often one of the challenges is that you sell the WatchGuard security bundle, and then we don't necessarily talk to our customers until it's time to renew that bundle. With both DLP and APT blocker, you can now revisit those customers with additional services that you can sell them outside of the security bundle. So it allows for you to have additional contacts, additional revenue potential with your customers by giving you some additional services to sell to them. So it is separate. The last thing is included in the security bundle. No, it is not included in the security bundle, much like DLP is not included in the security bundle. Will there be any super bundle that includes everything? That is under review, and certainly it could be available sometime in the future, but today it is not. And certainly the last comment about EU legislation being unfriendly to sending files to non-EU based clouds, certainly we recognize that, and in fact, we have solutions that are available or coming online to various EU countries for analysis, so that we can do file analysis within the EU, and certainly looking at further down the road than potentially some other offerings that would be more friendly to maybe on-premise type of analysis. So all of those are in play and being worked on. Certainly the most immediate one is recognizing that you need localized analysis, and that is actually actively in process with some, I believe, already online. So certainly scaling up as we come online and bring more and more WatchGuard firewalls in this process is certainly critical to that. We recognize that, and we certainly could have some sort of documentation in the future related to that as well. So I have totally blown up the time that you've allotted to me. I appreciate the time that you've spent with me. I really, really do understand that you have a lot of things that you have to do in your day-to-day business, and I do appreciate when you spent part of that day with me. So with that, I'll go ahead and say thank you for attending, and look forward to talking with you in the future, and I really hope that we will be able to meet someday, and someday soon, here in sunny Seattle. So with that, thank you, and we'll talk to you later. Bye-bye.